Hello everyone. Welcome back to Physical Education Class 12th. I am Rishi Pathania, Physical Education teacher in Cambridge International School. I hope you all are safe and healthy at home. Today we will discuss about chapter number 8, Biomechanics and Sports. Last days I was discussed few topic meaning and importance of biomechanics in sports, types of motions and Newton's law of motion. But today my new topic is friction and sports. Friction and sports. Friction is a force between two surfaces that are sliding or trying to slide across each other. The force that opposes the motion of an object is called friction. To stop a moving object, a force must act in the opposite direction to the direction of motion. Friction always works in the direction opposite to the direction in which the object is moving or trying to move. Friction always slows a moving object down. The amount of friction depends on the materials from which the two surfaces are made. The rougher the surface, the more friction is produced. Friction also produces heat. If you rub your hands together quickly, you will feel them get warmer. Next is types of friction. Friction of Friction is of two types. First is static friction. The force of friction which acts between two surfaces before the motion actually begins is called static friction. Static friction is also called limit friction because it represents the biggest possible friction between given surfaces under given conditions according to this picture. Second is dynamic or kinetic friction. The force of friction which comes into play when a body moves over the surface of another body is called dynamic and kinetic friction. This is two types. A is sliding friction. When an object slides or tends to slide over another object, it is called sliding friction. In this type, friction depends on the types of object and its surface. For example, sharpened ice skate blades reduce friction between the blade and the ice according to this picture. Next is rolling friction. Rolling friction can be seen in the movement of wheel. In other words, a wheel rolling across a surface is called rolling friction. In this type of friction also, nature of surface plays an important role. For example, on a rough surface, the friction will be move and on a smooth surface, the resistance will be less according to this picture. Next is application of friction in sports. Friction is usually called a necessary evil. Practically every signal sport reels on friction in some way. Friction in sport and physical exercise is sometimes an advantage and sometimes a disadvantage. So first is advantage of friction. First is helps in movement. It is difficult to walk on a slippery road due to low friction. When a person moves on ice, it becomes difficult to walk due to the low friction of the ice with the shoes. The friction between the sole of a shoes and the surface of the ground prevents us from slipping. Athletes, racers and jumpers use spikes and football players use studs in their shoes to have proper friction while they run fast. Without friction, it would not have been possible for us to walk. Next point is helps in holding objects. Friction enable us to hold the objects and equipment. Without friction, the equipment would just fall out the hand. Handles of hockey sticks and tennis rackets are covered with special tapes to increase friction. Next is helps to catch object. Friction between hand and ball allows us to catch and throw the ball. Next is helps in changing direction. Friction between feet and ground helps an athlete to change direction while running. Next point is helps in stopping the moving objects. When you apply the brakes of a car, friction helps to stop it. The brake or disc pad pushed against the inside of the brake drum or against the rotor inside the moving wheel. The surface of the drum or rotor slide against the brake disc or pad, which is a force of friction that slows the vehicle down. This is advantage of friction all. Next is disadvantage of friction. Friction is disadvantage in some sports and games. For example, first is wastage energy. In cycling, if there is more friction between road and tires, there will be more wastage of energy of the cyclist. The tires must be properly in flats to reduce force of friction. Next is wears things out. Due to the friction, there is wear and tear of object. Lubrication is used to allow the part to move easier. Moreover, prevents wear and tear. Next is slow speed. Friction slows down the speed. Rolling shoes and smooth surface are used to minimize friction in roller skating. Next point is makes movement difficult. So friction can make the job more difficult when one has to move the other object. Access friction can make it difficult to slide a box across the floor, walk through deep snows extra. Next point is causes injuries. Friction can cause injuries if a player slides across the ground during sports. Next is limits the ball flight. Friction between wall and air limits how far the ball can be thrown. Next is last point heats parts. Constant rubbing of two surfaces together creates heat energy and is threat of overheating due to friction. Thus is it can be said the friction has its advantage and disadvantage in various sports. Next is methods of reducing friction. So method of reducing friction, first point is polishing the surface. Friction can be reduced by polishing and rubbing the surface to reduce their unevenness and making the surface smooth. Second point is lubrication. Lubricants such as oil, grease, etc. are used to minimize the force of friction. Third point is streamlining. Streamlining applies to the friction generated by the wind and liquids. By adopting a more streamlined shape, the flow of air or liquid will be smoother and easier against the surface of a particular object. Next point fourth is ball bearing or roller bearing. The use of ball bearings and rollers generally reduce friction between surfaces as it changes the nature of the relative motion between the surfaces from sliding to rolling. Next point is special designing. Nowadays, specially designed helmets are used in some sports to reduce friction and save important time. These helmets reduce friction by allowing air to flow over the head and down the back. This is all methods of reducing friction. Next is methods of increasing friction by making both the surfaces rough. In this way, irregularities of both surfaces will be interlocked, that is, spikes on soles of shoes. First is press the two surfaces together harder. The friction between two surfaces can be increased if the surfaces are pressed into each other with greater force. Next point is using magnesium powder. In some sports like weightlifting, gymnastic, outdoor and indoor, rock climbing, badminton, tennis, basketball, golf, bowling, baseball, and pole dancing, athletes always do simmer white powder, it means magnesium powder, into their hands and instruments. When playing, the athletes sweat in the hands and wet hands reduce the frictional force, making it difficult for athletes to hold instruments well, thus affecting the effect of the action, easily to make a mistake and injured. In this condition, magnesium carbonate powder can absorb the palm's sweat. At the same time, it also can increase the friction between the palms and instruments. It in this way, athletes can hold instrument perfectly. Next is remove lubricants between the two surfaces. To increase friction, remove any lubricants using only dry, unlubricated parts to generate friction. This is all methods of increasing friction. Thank you very much, students. Any student who feel any doubt, any query, they can call me. And again, we will discuss new topic, class of physical education. Thank you. Have a nice day.